is April Joy J. Gallego. For now, we will discuss about risk management. But before that, we'll define first what is risk and risk management. Risk is defined as the possibility of loss or injury. Then, risk management is the assessment of risk and measures taken to alleviate its effects, meaning it refers to the practices of identifying potential risk in advance, then analyze it and take precautions or steps to prevent or reduce the effects of that risk. Now, we will dig more about risk management. As we don't know, risk management has some functions. These are recognizing, reacting, recording, and relaying. First is recognizing, which is the need and identifying the risk. Second, reacting to the need and knowing what can be done to mitigate loss. Third, recording or tracking measures and improving on them. And the fourth one is relaying or communicating the mitigation plans. Recognizing, of course, we should first identify the risk before we can take steps to what we need to do. Next is reacting. After recognizing the risk, we can take actions on what we're going to do. The next is the recording. It can be the listing or finding steps or precautions and improve them to have a better solution. Next and lastly is relaying. It is done by communicating, then relay the plans or the ways or the created ways to solve the problems, rather to prevent the loss of the organization. Next, we will talk about a risk may stem from both man-made and natural disaster and accident. Example, risk during events, fire, earthquake, bomb threat, and other crimes or acts of terrorism. Now, let's talk about the fire. So what we're going to do when such risks do happen? For fire, make sure the alarms are working before the event. And as an event coordinator, you should have the emergency numbers. Next is bomb threat. While most bomb threats are pranks, such threats must always be dealt with caution. Some tips on what you must do when you receive a bomb threat at an event. Number 1. Note the exact time of call and note details about the caller as much as you can. Number 2. Try to know what type of bomb it is, where it might be, and when it will explode. Number 3. Inform the person in charge and the top management as soon as possible. Note: inform the person in charge of the security, inform the police and visitors. Do not do things on your own. Leave it to the professionals. Next is typhoon or an unexpected weather condition. More than 20 typhoons visit the Philippines every year, and with climate change, the weather gets more and more unpredictable. Pay close attention to details like availability of umbrella, mops to avoid muddy floors, and tents, and other equipments to avoid accidents. Now, let's talk about crisis communication plan. Know how to immediately respond to a crisis as it occurs. Select a single spokesperson. This must be a real person from your organization and not a hired public relations talent. This spokesperson will be only one authorized to talk about the crisis and measures being undertaken to address it. If you are assigned as the spokesperson and if a crisis indeed occurs, you must, number 1, publicly acknowledge the problem before others do. Number 2, say what is being done. Number 3, take control by leading the dissemination of timely information regularly. Number 4, Be open to advice and assistance. Number 5. Provide updates and put it on paper. Now, we will discuss some forms of risk management. First, let's talk about the insurance. An insurance is means of protection from financial loss. If risk is possibility of loss or damage, insurance is a payment guarantee in case this risk indeed happens. An example of event insurance is the legal liability protection for organizers of one-off fireworks displays, an exhibition, or even multiple events. Insurance protects organizers from liabilities which may be caused by accidental injury or damage arising from the event. Now, let's talk about the contract. A contract is a written or spoken agreement that is intended to be enforceable by law. A contract is a binding agreement which the law can enforce. It is entered into by two or more parties to exchange promises to do or refrain from doing acts. Contracts are used to seal with suppliers and clients alike. Contracts can be written in various ways, but usually have similar parts. A simple agreement may be good choice of form because this is less stiff compared to a full-blown contract and yet satisfied the needs of an event organizers. Before we discuss about the major parts of simple agreement, let's define first the agreement. An agreement is a negotiated and typically legally binding arrangement between two parties. The major parts of a simple agreement includes parties. An agreement usually starts with identification of the parties who undertake the promises, what business they are in, and their address. Next is background. This section describes ongoing circumstances to contextualize the agreement. Next is body of the agreement. This is the working or operational part of the document which indicates all the details of the promises, including the payment terms and the specifications of the product or service to be delivered in exchange of the payment. Next is the integration clause. This indicates that the agreement is the only agreement between the parties with respect to the matters covered in the agreement, and that agreement may only be amended in writing. Courts do not recognize changes made verbally in written contracts without an integration clause. Next is the signature section. The closing and signature section should mention that the parties intend to be legally bound by the agreement. The next is the other clauses, which may be important for an event organizer. It is placed before the integration clause. These are choice of law. It designates the country whose law shall govern the interpretation of a contract, lawsuit included. This is particularly important for international events or for organizers dealing with the overseas partners, suppliers, and clients. Next is force majeure. It means greater force, and it excuses a party from liability if some unforeseen events beyond the control of that party prevents it from performing its obligations under the contracts, such as natural disaster and war. And that would be all. I hope you learned again from this session. Thank you for watching.